Our first speaker today has stood 5 times in local elections and 1 general election for the British National Party. He is an activist and an ex-serviceman, servicing in the Royal Marine Commandos. Please welcome Dennis Shambley.
I'll tell you where I'm coming from initially anyway. My grandfather fought in the First World War. He went in the trenches at the age of 42 as a private. He came out of the trenches in 1918 at the age of 46, still a private, in the East Lancashire Regiment. He went through 5 battalions. He lost 2 brothers before the war in a disaster at a coal mine called the Pretoria Pit disaster, which is in a town called Weston. It was called Pretoria because a lot of the people that worked there had fought at Pretoria in South Africa. He lost a daughter who was 10 years old in 1920. She fell in Brosden Brook and she got Wheals disease. And my father, obviously his son, he got wounded at Dunkirk, and that killed him in 1946 when I was 3-year-old. And I look back on what they went through and what all our families went through, proper poverty and deprivation. And now the country, well, not at this particular moment in time, but when you cast our minds back 20 or 30 years, when our country pulled itself out of recession and out of struggles, who's benefited from what they did in the First and Second World War? We haven't. We've benefited nothing at all. I find it hard to believe that I worked 50 years, right, and I get less than anybody that walks into this country with a sob story. Why have I worked all that time and I'm getting less than what they get to live on? If you look at that Grenville Tower fire, most of the people in there they're on £500 a week rent. And the biggest percent of them had no right to be here, or a vast majority were immigrants. I've actually fought against terrorists in Aden. They were called terrorists. They were an organisation called Flossie. Now, you might think that sounds a bit feminine, but it stands for Fighting for the Liberation of Occupied South Yemen. And I've also fought against an army, the Indonesian army. The Indonesian army, the difference between them and terrorists is armies wear uniforms. Terrorists don't. In this country, they're calling the Muslims terrorists, and in my opinion, they're not. They're a very, very well-disciplined army. And if you think they radicalise the children to commit terrorist offences, you're wrong. They threaten to wipe their family out. And that's the way they are. That's their discipline procedure. If you don't do what you're told, your parents will get killed. So what do? They do it. But it's like everything else. Oh, these poor lads have been radicalised. No, they've not. They're part of an organisation, and they are, in fact, an army. And they do wear uniforms. They wear burqas. And they wear beards. Can anybody in here tell me of any Muslim, anywhere, that's been killed in this country due to a terrorist offence committed by Muslims? I don't think you can. Because it's all planned out. It's not somebody they've radicalised who just run out of the house, run and thrown a bomb at somebody, blown himself up. And again, you're cretin like that left-wing tosser, excuse my French, burn them. I was watching the news after the Manchester bombing, and he said, "This will bring us closer together. We'll be stronger." I thought, you bloody absolute gobshite. An 8-year-old child had just been killed, and he comes out with a statement like that. In any other country, in my opinion, he would have been dragged out and shot in the street. Fancy making a comment like that. If his daughter had been killed, what would he have said then? That's what annoys me about these bastards. They're two-faced and false, everything they say. Persecuted. He's a persecuted minority. They're desperate to get here. Well, I think I'd be desperate too. If I walked into this country and just said, I'm being persecuted at home, or take the, I don't know what the population of Africa is, but it must be talking about 2 billion people. And the first thing Cameron said when he came to power was, any homosexuals in Africa who feel like they're being persecuted can come into this country. Now we elect him to represent us, and his first duty is to protect us. And by bringing people into this country, he's not even performing his first duty. And can you recollect Jack Straw when that aircraft landed at London with those Afghanis in? They kidnapped the plane and it landed here. And don't forget, he's the fella that knew the Muslims were raping our kids in Blackburn and all over the northwest of England. He said they consider white children to be easy meat. And they were easy meat because the police did nothing about it. And he was the Home Secretary, so he must have known what was going on, and he never told them to do anything about it. And as a matter of fact, can you tell me any copper or any politicians who's had their daughter raped? Because I can't think of anything.